Hello and welcome to Recovery Weekly, an interactive weekly program used to guide you, the family member of an individual with a substance abuse problem, through the process of recovery. I'm your host, Scott Kalane, joined as always by my co-host, Ian Koch. Ian is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor, as well as an internationally certified addiction specialist for NortheastAddictionConsultants.com. Thanks for joining me today, Ian.
Absolutely.
And there was a topic. We wanted to have John McKenzie from Hope Treatment Group on the show this week, but something happened. Something came up, so maybe we'll have him on later on in the season. But
Probably not now.
no, okay.
You blew it.
There's one chance, and you blew it. But the show must go on, and today we've decided we are going to focus on 12-step recovery as a process of helping people with addiction. Ian, I know that when you were telling me your story, you first tried to do it on your own, right? You tried to white knuckle it, as they say, through sobriety before even thinking of, dabbling in the steps.
So what's the question?
Did you? I'm sorry. So you attempted to just you wanted to do it on your own, right, without 12-step, and how did that end up for you? What did you find was missing?
Well, it's not, it's not even, I guess, about my own personal recovery, but my experience with others is that regardless of when you put down the drugs and alcohol, what happens is the addict often feels like they're missing something, and usually sobriety isn't enough, which is why relapse happens. Because it's just being sober isn't necessarily the answer.
Hmm. I gotcha. And how do you see it as a whole fitting into addiction treatment, though? Does it offer for people that are trying to get sober?
It's a really good question. Right now, what I've seen is I've actually seen people veer away from 12-step recovery. Um, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there amongst professionals, amongst people in the recovery community, that some things really need to be cleared up and addressed. Uh, for instance, a gentleman called me, I think that was earlier this week, maybe even last Sunday, and he was pretty irate. He was seeing a drug and alcohol counselor, a mandated counselor, because he lost his license, got a DUI, that type of thing. And this guy has been very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's got 2.5 years of sobriety, very, very active, helps other people, does the steps, goes to meetings, the whole 9 yards. And the counselor told the guy that he needed to do more, that wasn't going to be good enough for him to stay sober. So my friend called to basically say, like, is this true? And what do you think? And that spawned a really lengthy conversation where it seems like the common understanding in professionals is that going to meetings is 12-step recovery, and it's not. It's a part of. When years ago, I was doing an internship for my master's degree, and I was working with the drug court, and drug courts are extremely helpful for offenders who pick up, substance charges due to substance abuse, and they were mandating people to get sponsors and to go to more meetings. So if you were the client and you relapsed or something, or didn't show up for a drug test, or didn't show up at an appointment or something, your punishment would be to do extra meetings for the week, and you would have to get a sponsor. So one day I was sitting in And the thing, now mind you, it's, you know, case managers, there's clinical social workers in the room, there are district attorneys, state attorneys, there's the judge, you know, and all these people, and we're having this meeting, this case review, going over clients, and as they're mandating more meetings, I like, you know, timidly raised my hand and said, uh, why are you guys mandating people to get sponsors? And they gave me their explanation, which is because that's what they're supposed to do.
Mm.
And I said, I don't want to offend anybody in this room, but do you guys know what the point of a sponsor is? And they all kind of got quiet and looked at me. And it was one of the really smartest things I did, because then I had the opportunity to really explain to these folks like what 12-step recovery is about, what the point is. And the truth is that like 12-step recovery is not for everyone. You know, for 30 addicts that are recommended to go to AA and NA, maybe 10 go. For 30 parents that are recommended to go to Al-Anon, maybe one goes, maybe. You know, what 12-step recovery can offer people is fellowship. So like a group of people that they can relate to, understand. Kind of some of the 12-step literature talks about the feeling of like being on the Titanic as it's sinking, or on a sinking ship, you know, and that like camaraderie that people have like when they escape disaster, you know. So there's that feeling that people can carry through 12-step recovery. And then also the working of the 12 steps, which removes the obsession to drink. And if it's an Al-Anon situation, or Nar-Anon would be like Narcotics Anonymous for families. Al-Anon would be like Alcoholics Anonymous for families. Those 12-step fellowships, what the working of the 12 steps does is it removes the obsession to drink, or removes the obsession to control the addict or alcoholic.
Yes. Okay, and it doesn't just work though for alcoholics and drug addicts, right? There's overeaters meetings that they, you know, use similar tactics in, well, not
Mm.
tactics, but methods that enable overeaters to realize what they've been doing this whole time to themselves and the people around them.
Mm. Yeah, there's approximately 240 12-step fellowships.
Wow. Just different
So yeah,
sects.
yeah, everything from Nicotine Anonymous, Gambling Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Drug Addicts Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Crystal Meth Addicts Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics and Addicts Anonymous, Love Addicts Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Sex Addicts and Love Addicts Anonymous. There's Emotions Anonymous, Schizophrenics Anonymous, um, and the list, you know, goes on and on and on. And then there's combinations of, and you know,
Yeah.
a lot of it depends on the area. The most popular would be Alcoholics Anonymous, probably followed by Narcotics Anonymous. Down in in Montreal, Cocaine Anonymous is huge. In Montreal, there's actually about 7 Cocaine Anonymous meetings a day. Once you drop into Vermont and New Hampshire, I think New Hampshire right now has 1 Cocaine Anonymous meeting. Vermont has 3 or 4. Maine has 3 or 4. Massachusetts has 3 or 4. You get down into Florida, and Cocaine Anonymous is popular again. Over out west, it's popular. So
Now,
each geographic region kind of starts to pick up fellowships and move them appropriately.
why would Cocaine Anonymous differ from, say, Narcotics Anonymous? What's the, you know, it's a
What's the
drug,
difference?
right?
It is, you know, and this is, man, this has been a controversy in AA for a while. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous started in 1939, and they started and they adopted the 12 traditions, and they decided to keep it towards alcohol because they saw some other groups fail, mainly groups called the Jacoby Club, Emmanuel Movement, and Washingtonians. These other groups had failed because they got involved in like all these other matters, political matters, all sorts of stuff, religious matters. So trying to help too many people do too many things. So Alcoholics Anonymous decided we're going to be AA. That annoyed some people. So in 1941, I believe it was 1941, that's when Narcotics Anonymous started. Narcotics Anonymous, in their first step, says we admitted we're powerless over our addiction. They believe that alcohol is a drug, but they take addiction as a whole. Alcoholics Anonymous says we admitted we're powerless over alcohol. Cocaine Anonymous says we admitted we were powerless over cocaine and all other mind-altering substances. So the difference actually in Cocaine Anonymous, they started in I think 1981 or 82, something around there. They use different literature than Narcotics Anonymous. Cocaine Anonymous actually uses the majority of their literature is the same as Alcoholics Anonymous. They have found that it says something in their literature like about how we use the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous because it's proven to work. Narcotics Anonymous has their own set of literature. So each fellowship has its different identifier coming in the door. When someone finally gets to that place of surrender, I'm beat, I can't do this anymore, I'm hopeless. They walk in the door not thinking, oh, I'm hopeless because I've done all these different drugs. It's alcohol has beat me up. Cocaine, I've just been up for 3 days having sex with random people peering out of windows. The heroin, I'm stealing from my parents. I've got track marks up and down my arm. I'm terribly sick when I'm not using. They come in the door for a specific substance. And that's why, because like AA doesn't, and I've witnessed this, AA doesn't want a heroin addict to come in and only hear about alcohol and then that person leave, right? So AA stays to AA. Ideally, that heroin addict goes to NA. I was working at a detox 5 years ago, probably at this point, and there was a woman. It was her first time ever to any 12-step recovery meeting. It was an AA meeting that actually had only heroin addicts for some reason. And they read the AA literature and then they went around and shared about their problems. And this woman was in her 60s, never did drugs, and she came out of the meeting and I said, so what'd you think of the meeting? And she said, well, it was all right, but I'm not an alcoholic. Now she's in detox. We're giving her 20 milligrams of Valium every 4 hours because her detox symptoms are so bad. And she doesn't think she's an alcoholic. And it turns out she didn't think she was an alcoholic because she never used heroin. Because that's what she heard. That's what she associated alcohol with. Newcomers, people who are sick and have never been to meetings are very, very impressionable. So the identifier is getting in the door. The main foundation of 12-step recovery is one person helping the other, assuming that person who's helping has had the same experience. So it would be one alcoholic helping another alcoholic, one cocaine addict helping another cocaine addict. If you're an alcoholic, do you want somebody who's an overeater trying to help you?
Right.
Do you want, if they don't identify your problem, if you've never had the problem, it's like if you got a flat tire on your car, right, or you need a mechanic, are you going to take your car to Best Buy, to the electronic department, or the DVD section? No, you're going to take your car to a mechanic, someone who has that experience.
Specialized help, yeah.
Exactly. If your toilet is backed up, you're not going to call the mechanic. You're going to call a plumber. If you called a mechanic and was like, hey, man, my toilet's backed up, you need to come over and fix it, the guy's going to hang up on you.
But at the root of all this, the 12 steps shine through, right? No matter what the meaning might be there's some element that is similar for every addict. You know, whether it's gambling, shopping, eating, whatever. It's the same kind of void that they're trying to fill, right? With these things, with these behaviors.
I would say yes. My professional opinion is yes. That goes into the next controversy of 12-step recovery, which is addicts, especially in the Northeast. It's not as big in other parts of the country, but in the Northeast, it's really big, where addicts want to go to AA. They don't have a drinking problem. They say they don't have a drinking problem. They might, but they say they don't have a drinking problem. They say they don't even like alcohol, yet they want to go to AA, because it's more popular. There's more people. It's more social. And man, to be honest, I think that's killing people. I can't tell you how many addicts have relapsed because they go to AA, they don't hear about their drug of choice, and then they think, well, I'm not an alcoholic, I surely can have a drink. They have a drink, they lose some inhibitions, and then they start shooting heroin again.
Right. Slippery slope. But in that case, that particular case, is it complete sobriety no matter what is the way it has to be done, right, in order for you to recover properly? So they're going to AA and they're hearing about people's troubles as far as with drinking, and they try to relate it back to some of their, maybe cocaine binges or heroin nights, and they can't, but they understand what comes with using drugs and alcohol. Do you think that puts a lot of strain on people to try to like overcompensate when they hear these stories, as if, oh, yeah, I've never woken up in an alley, but I've overdosed, Or is it, in your idea, is it that you want to hear something more specific so you can really have one of those aha moments, like, wow, I remember that exactly?
The history of Alcoholics Anonymous. What happened was Dr. Bob, one of the co-founders, he was trying to get sober for a long time, and people were telling him what to do, all this stuff. When Bill Wilson went to see him, the other co-founder, the first time, and the reason Dr. Bob had an aha moment was because he identified. It was the first time that he said, "Oh my God, I did that. Oh my God, I did that too. Oh wow, I identified in that." When I run groups at like an IOP program or something like that, if I took like a baggie and did this, if you're an alcoholic, that might not mean anything to you, But if you're a heroin addict or a cocaine addict, that might mean something, right? The addict will flick the bag, the heroin falls to the bottom so they can see roughly how much they have. An alcoholic isn't, if they've never done drugs like that or done a lot, that's not going to do anything for them. But you can do that in an IOP center, and the addicts, their mouths start watering because it triggers them, right? If I'm in a group with alcoholics and I start talking about the hot summer day and the way the beer sits there and the way it sweats, the bottle of beer sweats, or the way the ice sounds as it falls into the glass. And then when you pour the scotch or whatever on the ice, and then as you swirl it around, the ice makes the noise in the glass, right? The heroin addict's going to look at me like, what are you talking about? Yes, some people, the argument that addicts always give is that, well, oh, I can identify and that's fine. I'm not saying people can't identify. I'm not saying people can't replace one for the other, but it's the person coming in the door. that's never been to a meeting, are they going to be able to do that? You know, and that's where people lose sight on it. Is it the person? I'm not talking about the person who's relapsed over and over and over, or the person who and been in and out of the rooms for 20 years. I'm not talking about the person who has been in the rooms for 20 years sober. I'm talking about the person who's brand new off the street going to their first meeting.
Mm.
Are they going to hear something that's going to help them to identify and say, you know what, I did that too, I need to be here? Or are they going to hear something that says,
Detract them from coming back.
I didn't, yeah, I didn't do that. These people are crazy. I don't need to be
Mm.
here.
Because that's what tends to happen in these meetings is that people go to the extreme with what the case is. Like the first person you could hear speak could give you the most terrible horror story about how they ended up in jail, lost their wife, their family won't talk to them. When, some 21-year-old kid could go like, well, yeah, me and my mom get in fights, but she still lets me live in the house, and all of a
Still
sudden,
pays my rent,
yeah.
gives me plans. Yeah.
So, right, when you have that, that's already going against your odds of connecting, if you're a newcomer. But then if you're in the wrong meeting to begin with and hearing about drug, problems when you're having alcohol problems, you're going to have an even worse chance of, identifying, as you say. So,
It's what it comes down to is each fellowship, their primary purpose is to help the newcomer, right?
mm,
But they get all wound up. Everyone gets all wound up in AA and NA. I mean, you can't say this, you can't do this, you can't say this. And the truth is the newcomer doesn't hear what they need to hear. You know, that's the facts. You know, I've seen it over and over. I've talked to a lot of people in 12-step recovery who argue this and say, oh, no, an addict can go to an AA meeting. And I'm not saying they can't.
mm,
You know, AA's literature says that addicts are welcome to go, they're not supposed to participate. Um,
ah,
that's what there's a difference between open and closed meetings. Open meetings are for anyone to go and attend, but only alcoholics are allowed to share. Closed meetings are for only alcoholics to go. What has happened is people think that open meetings mean that alcoholics and addicts are allowed to go and share. In a lot of groups, because each group out there is completely different. So in a lot of groups today that is acceptable. I would say if you're an addict and watching this, get a feel for your group before you just go in and step on people's toes. Some areas are very, very strict. Some areas are not and don't care.
mm,
Um, but it really is about helping that person.
okay. And as far as a reason to even want to do the steps beyond recovery, what would you say to someone to intrigue them to even consider working through the steps?
It's real simple. It's the most successful program of recovery for 75 years.
Nice. Okay.
It's it, it, it's the it's the one consistency of almost every addiction treatment center out there is they all say go to AA, get a sponsor, work the steps. The point of the steps is not to necessarily be a good person or find like a god or anything like that. The point of the steps is to remove the obsession to drink. As the person works the steps, they repair their relationships, they become a good person, they find a spiritual way of life. But those are all defaults. The point is to remove that obsession to want to pick up again.
Okay. Plain and simple. Well, thanks, Ian, for joining me this week. Next week, we'll have Michael Hoffman, author and therapist in Buddhist and Jungian traditions. For us here at Northeast Addiction Consultants, we wish you and your family a safe and happy 4th of July. And be careful as you go into the next step, next phase of your recovery, because it can get tough out there. But until next week.